It's all going to zero against Bitcoin.
It's going up forever, Warren.
You're against Bitcoin, you're against freedom.
Welcome to Simply Bitcoin, your number one source for the peaceful Bitcoin revolution, breaking news, culture, medic warfare. We will be your guide through the separation of money and state. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Simply Bitcoin, the most watched daily Bitcoin live show on YouTube, Rumble, and X. Sit back, relax, enjoy the ride. We have a lot to talk about today. Michael Saylor dropping the hot fire at the Bitcoin for Corporations conference. He said the quiet part out loud. He said, like, look, the reason that he believes that Bitcoin is going to 100x over the next 10 years is because a lot of people are just not awakened to it yet. And he's basically making the case that, look, you know, once everyone sees it, once everyone's on a Bitcoin standard, he believes that, you know, the opportunity isn't there as much as it used to be, right? So I think that's a really good point from Saylor. We have the clip for you guys. We're going to play it for you. And then there was this viral clip going around the internet about all these college graduates basically booing Bitcoin. And I find it a little bit funny because you can bet like a big portion of the people in that audience, in that graduation audience, is like hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt. And, you know, again, like, of course, that's a decision. You know, some people want to go to college, some people don't want to go to college. But, you know, I just kind of find it funny that, you know, they're totally open to, you know, going into debt, you know, to potentially further the career, potentially not. But they're so, you know, completely against Bitcoin, which, you know, I find it funny. I find it hilarious. So I'm going to play it for you guys. The community reacted to it in a certain way, which I think is interesting. And also the other concept that you guys know we love to talk about on Simply Bitcoin, which is, of course, the separation of money and state. We have like little examples of what the sovereign individual predicted back in 1997 in terms of Canada imposing an exit tax. Of course, Roger Ver was arrested in Spain for, you know, not paying his taxes, even though he gave up his citizenship. So we're starting to see inklings of that. And I think, you know, what we always say on this show is that Bitcoin exposes incentives. And I think that you start to question the very relationship between you and the state. Like, isn't it a little bit crazy that, you know, the state forces you to pay, you know, a percentage of your net worth if you want to leave, if you want to give up your city? It's almost as if they're holding you hostage. Like, you know, of course, that's my opinion, but it starts to seem like that. And I think as things start to accelerate, I think as more and more people start to opt out, I think, you know, I think things will get even, I think things will get more interesting. And this is where, you know, truly decentralized technology comes into play. This is where Bitcoin comes into play. This is where Nostr comes into play. This is where sovereign computing come into play, right? Because again, you know, they can definitely co-opt intermediaries. They can definitely co-opt someone else's computer, but it's a lot more difficult for them to, you know, go after millions upon millions of individuals holding their own private keys, millions upon millions of individuals running their own computing devices and having peer-to-peer communications in that way, right? It becomes a very, very difficult, right, to, you know, to enforce certain things. And I think the whole control structure was based on the fact that they thought that there was always going to be a handful of intermediaries that they can co-opt and they can basically use as, you know, an arm of law enforcement. And I think things are starting to change. So anyways, we're going to have all that for you guys today. And also we have a very special guest, and I consider him a friend at this point. We have the CEO and founder of Sign, Matt. How you doing? Welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me back on. What's up, Nico?
And I just want to give a shout out to the absolutely flaming bull in the back of Matt's background. Matt, you want to talk a little bit about that? Because unfortunately, like, Matt hanged it up before we went on air, but it was perfect in the sense that now it's an epic background. So Matt, what's up with that bull, bro?
Every time I do something, there's just this plain white background and people always give me crap about it. And you know what I mean? Like, I don't have like books in the background or anything fancy. And so I picked this up at BitBlockBoom 2023. So, you know, a year ago. And this is in the, you know, in the depths of the bear market. And the bull market was supposed to begin when I hung that. That at least was the promise that I had received when I bid on this at the auction, is that whoever got this would trigger the bull market when they hung it. And I never hung it. It's been sitting in my basement, and the bull market got started without me. And so, you know, I called bullshit on the voodoo that this was supposed to cause, but we've stalled, right? We've sort of got hung up, and now people are even questioning whether it goes flat or goes down. So I figured it was time. So I'm using this show as an opportunity to officially launch the beginning of the bull market.
That's right, ladies and gentlemen. You heard it here first. The bull market may commence now that Matt has hanged the flaming bull in the background. I also want to bring up my legendary co, who is always optimistic. Look at that giant smile, Optimist Fields. How you doing, Opti?
I'm doing great, man. It's good to have you back, Nico. And man, life's always good on a Bitcoin standard. And shouts out to Matt, because he's officially starting the bull run again. So you guys heard it here first. It's going to start pumping. Absolutely love to hear it.
I believe it. It's going to be a great show. And during the culture segment, guys, we're going to talk about sovereign computing, which I hope a little bit of you guys got some hints of in the opening monologue about the importance of that in the next 5 to 10 years. I think, it's interesting because I've been experimenting with a lot of the applications that are on Start9. By the way, highly recommend it. Not only is it a Bitcoin node, it's a sovereign computer. Most people buy it for the Bitcoin node is the Trojan horse, but once you get in, you start to play with it. So I've been playing with a lot of the applications, Matt. Like Nextcloud, I believe, is one of them. There's a Vault Warden is another one. So, and it's incredibly awesome because you can access basically your computer from anywhere around the world via Tor. And it's not only, and I've been also using the mempool space locally instead of, going to the URL, which of course doxes your IP address. So I've been using all these applications and just kind of experimenting with the device. And it's just been so incredibly fun. But for anyone who's not in the know, Matt, could you give a quick elevator pitch on what is sovereign computing? What is Start9 and what is sovereign computing?
I'm going to do the elevator for real, because that's a huge question. So currently, everyone on Earth is using what we call clients. You could think of them as remote controls. Your cell phone, your laptop, your desktop, these are all client computers, right? AKA remote controls. What are they remotely controlling? They are remotely controlling one or more servers. In almost every circumstance, these servers are owned and operated by some company, right? Namely, the company whose app you downloaded. So if you download some app onto your iPhone and you open that app and you start doing things, you are remotely administering somebody else's server. This gives them enormous insight and control over your computing life, right? They can basically see every button that you're clicking. They are processing all the information. They're storing all the data. And according to, one, just practical reality, and two, things like the third-party doctrine, as soon as you do that, as soon as you begin to remotely administer somebody else's server for your computing needs, none of the information that touches or flows through or is stored on that server is protected by the Fourth Amendment, which protects information from illegal searches and seizures. So basically, no warrant is necessary for law enforcement or anyone with sufficient authority to just walk in and basically request everything on that server about you. So with that in mind, what do you do when this is your reality? Well, what you could and should do is stop using other people's servers to process all of your information and store all of your data, and instead use your own server, store your data on your own server from your own home, and access it from anywhere in the world using your cell phones and laptops, just like you would, ultimately resulting in the same user experience, except you are excluding every and all third parties from your digital life, becoming a digital sovereign. That information is protected by the Fourth Amendment because it is your server in your home. And so any search of it would require a warrant signed by a judge. I'm speaking strictly from a United States perspective. Obviously, different countries have different laws around what is and is not protected. But we believe this is a better model. The problem until now has been that it's almost impossible for a normal person to do. Running your own server from your own home and using it to run all sorts of different applications and accessing those applications from anywhere in the world and doing so with reliability and speed and efficiency has basically just been a non-starter for 99.999% of the human race, because it's just super difficult to do. And so what we have taken on as a company through our open source software endeavors is to build an operating system and computing paradigm that makes owning and operating and effectively using your own server achievable and easy for everyone.
Yeah, absolutely. And I can attest to that. You know, I tend to be, just because my mind is always in the content creation realm, I tend to like convenient things, but I always wanted to run my own node and connect to it remotely anywhere around the world. That was one of the issues that I had, and I was finally able to figure that out with my Start9 device. And eventually, I started experimenting with the other applications with it, and I can attest to that. It is so incredibly cool. That if you really, really value, your sovereignty and your own device, really, because I know for a fact, no matter where I'm traveling, like I'm in Madeira, Portugal, and I'm pulling up my Bitcoin on my Electrum or Wespero, whatever, I know that I'm connecting to my node at home. Like, that is so effing cool. And it feels really good, like to the point where like I'll open up multiple times just to see it sync, and knowing that it's, I'm connecting to my node like literally thousands of miles away. And I've done this in multiple countries, and it feels really good. And then not to mention all the other applications, the data storage, communications. It's so incredibly cool, guys. So I can't wait to talk more about that and the rest of the things we have on the show. Before we do that, I do want to give a shout out to our lead sponsor. And of course, I am talking about Bitcoin Well. Bitcoin Well is the best place to build your automatic self-custody Bitcoin stack. It's a publicly traded company coming out of Canada that recently expanded to all 50 US states. It is self-custody by default. Future-proof your money. What does that mean? That means that you can't buy Bitcoin on Bitcoin Well unless you're going to take self-custody, which perfectly aligns with the Simply Bitcoin ethos of the separation of money and state. This is a company that wants to make sure your grandchildren have a safe place to buy Bitcoin. It is the self-custody by default Bitcoin on-ramp in the US. Head over to bitcoinwell.com. It's incredibly easy to sign up. All you got to do is go to bitcoinwell.com/simply. You put in your email address and start enabling your independence. 1% spread, Bitcoin only, non-custodial. So guys, support Bitcoin self-custody on-ramps by default in the United States. Head over to bitcoinwell.com today. All right, everybody, let's hit the numbers. We have a lot to talk about.
The Bitcoin numbers.
Is your Bitcoin in cold storage really secure? Is your seed phrase really secure? Stamp Seed's do-it-yourself kit has everything you need to hammer your seed words into commercial-grade titanium plates instead of just writing them on paper. Don't store your generational wealth on paper. Paper is prone to water damage, fire damage. You want to put your generational wealth on one of the strongest metals on planet Earth, titanium. Your words are actually stamped into this metal plate with this hammer and these letter stamps. And once your words are in, they aren't going anywhere. No risk of the plate breaking apart and pieces falling everywhere. Titanium stamped seeds will survive nearly triple the heat produced by a house fire. They're also crush-proof, waterproof, non-corrosive, and time-proof. All things that paper is not, allowing you to hodl your Bitcoin with peace of mind for the long haul. Stamp your seed on Stamp Seed. All right, guys, I made it incredibly easy for you guys. You could scan the QR code on your screen. It'll take you directly to the Stamp Seed website, where you can get yourself a Stamp Seed titanium seed phrase storage kit, so you can properly secure your generational wealth. You can use promo code SIMPLY to get 15% off anything on their website. At the time of recording, the Bitcoin price is $63,530. Block height 842,464. Sats per dollar 1,574. Market cap 1.25 trillion. Bitcoin priced in gold 27.6 ounces. Bitcoin versus gold market cap 7.91%. The percentage issued of the total supply is 93.78%, declined from all-time high 13.8%, but not for long. The bull market has commenced. Forward monetary inflation 0.85%, and realized monetary inflation 1.69%. So even if governments and central banks get it back to that mythological, guru, whatever, 2% inflation number that they can't even explain why that is, 2% theft, your money has to have that in order to work. Bitcoin is still taking it to absolute school. And of course, the halvings ensure that number is just going to, that forward monetary inflation is just going to keep going down forever. Anyways, what I do want to talk about today is this again, it went viral. So essentially, this guy right here, Ohio State commencement speaker, talks Bitcoin in front of 60,000 people and gets booed. Let's check it out.
Great investors are open-minded and understand things before other people. So I know this might feel polarizing, but I encourage you to keep an open mind right now. I see Bitcoin as a very misunderstood asset class.
Here's like another version of it as well. Here we go.
So I know this might feel polarizing, but I encourage you to keep an open mind right now.
No.
I see Bitcoin.
Like, and then you see like in the screen on the top right, of course, something that we've showed to you guys multiple times, right? Like he even has like the data to back it up that, look, if you transition to a Bitcoin standard, your life will get progressively cheaper, right? The American dream is not dead. The American dream is thriving if you're on a Bitcoin standard. And not only is it the American dream has been exported all around the world. Bitcoin has already made all-time highs in most fiat currencies. And it just made an all-time high in the US dollar, and it's going to make another all-time high because it's infinity divided by 21 million. And your life will get cheaper. And what's really interesting to me is that this is an entire stadium. And Dylan LeClaire has a really good point. $100,000 of unsecured debt is good. Bitcoin is bad. Here's our boy Nick Can't Mind. Repeat after me. Capitalism, capitalism, bad, bad. Great job. You're so smart. Here's your degree. That'll be $300K. And the students freaking out. This is insane. This is crazy. But I think a lot of people were seeing this and it's like, yeah, this is pretty crazy. But here's our boy Nick, and I think Michael Saylor says it best. Like, the fact that so many people, and this is like the next generation of students, are looking down on it and basically not seeing an opportunity where you're seeing an opportunity. And this is something that I've seen other Bitcoiners kind of get frustrated about. Like, holy cow, like this isn't happening fast enough. I talk to my normie friends and they still don't get it. They still don't understand. Here's Michael Saylor explaining to basically the Bitcoin for Corporations crowd why that is a good thing, why that actually is an opportunity. And he mentions, the fact that he believes that Bitcoin will 100x in the next 10 years. And it sounds unbelievable from our perspective. But let's say it does half of that. Let's say 25%, 30% of that, right? That's still absolutely insane. And what I got to say is, if I told you 10 years ago that Bitcoin would be where it's at today, you would have booed me out of the room. You would have laughed at me. And it seems like, we got a similar reaction. I never forget Andreas Antonopoulos giving speeches when Bitcoin was at $100 to an empty room. I remember that. I never forget that. Andreas, shout out to him. He orange pilled me. I was watching his videos in 2016 and it really resonated with me. I'm not going to lie. Of course, I came for the money. I stayed for the revolution. But, if everyone sees it, then, maybe you're a little late. And I think that's what Michael Saylor is trying to say in this clip. Let's check it out.
If people agree with you when you say, I like Bitcoin, that means it's not a good investment anymore. You understand? at the point when it's not controversial and everybody agrees with you, everybody will own it, the price will be 100x. You won't be able to afford to buy 1% of what you want, right? You want to know it. You don't want them to understand it. Let them take 10 years to figure it out, because that's how you 100x.
I think he's right. Like, I'll be honest with you. I think he's right. I'm at that point where, you know, if people want to be like if people just want to, like, you know, be like that and, you know, just cheer and, you know, clap. And I'll say this many times, like, if you're a Gen Zer or if you're a millennial, you do not have the same opportunity that your parents once had to acquire real estate, to get ahead in life. Like, Bitcoin is your ticket out of that situation. Bitcoin is your way forward. I've seen it not only personally, but I've seen it in the people around me. I've seen them, once they've adopted a Bitcoin standard, their life improves, right? Of course, Saylor's looking at it from an investment standpoint, but let's say you missed the boat 10 years from now, from whatever reason, you still didn't listen. It's still a good idea to adopt a Bitcoin standard, because, you know, it's like, there's a finite supply. It's going to ensure your purchasing power, your energy, your time, right? So yeah, I think we're still early, to say the least. I still think the masses have no idea what this thing is. And I think the masses are still drinking the Kool-Aid, man. Like, they're still drinking that college Kool-Aid for whatever reason. I don't know what that school is teaching them, but you know, booing something that has been the best performing asset that is, you know, completely changes the world, you know, is hilarious. It just reminds me of Andreas, you know, giving a lecture to a college room. Now, we have made progress in the sense that at least they know what Bitcoin is when the guy brought it up, right? You know, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, they would have been like, what are you talking about? Right. So at least we've made progress, but, you know, I think they're going to regret, you know, saying that, you know, 5-10 years from now. Anyways, Matt, I'll start with you. Do you think Saylor's right? What's your reaction on the whole stadium of college students booing Bitcoin? What's your take on all this?
First of all, Saylor is definitely right. That is the sort of nature of investments, not savings, as Bitcoin will eventually become. But if you're wanting to increase your purchasing power, your worth, right, your amount of capital that you control, you have to find things before other people do, right? It doesn't need to be Bitcoin. It's really anything, right? Like, even as a child. So quick backstory real quick. Like, my parents gave me control over my stock brokerage account when I was 12. I was able to call my broker and make trades without their permission up to certain limits when I was 12. And they did that because I had been picking them good, and I exhibited a degree of, you know, restraint when it came to not being reckless. But I just say that because ultimately, even at that age, what I was doing, my philosophy was to find something that I thought was awesome. Like, it was basically just that. I just lived my life. And whenever I encountered something that was really, really cool, the first thing I asked myself was, does anybody else know about this yet? And if the answer was no, like, I felt like I had discovered something before other people did, the next thing I did was sought whether there was an investment opportunity in that thing. Like, is there a stock for it? Is there a, you know, is it something I can trade? And if both of those answers were yes, like, it's something I like, it's something other people don't know about yet, and it's tradable, it's something I can reasonably get into, then I did. And that was my basic philosophy. And it always worked well. And anytime I tried to do anything other than that, like short something that I didn't like, or, you know, any other chart voodoo or anything like that, it always failed and I always lost. But a tried and true means of investing is find something that's awesome before other people do and get some skin in the game. So he's right. And the bigger the opportunity and the longer it takes people to figure out, or the cooler the thing and the longer it takes, the bigger the opportunity. So with Bitcoin, it's obviously massive because it's a massive earth-shattering change, and it's taking people a very long time to find out about it and understand it. So it's a huge opportunity. Today, it was more of an opportunity yesterday, but it'll still be an opportunity in the near future from an investment standpoint, right? Bitcoin always is useful, even after it ceases to be an investment. But right now it still is a huge investment opportunity, in my opinion.
I 100% agree. And I think there's two things can be true, and I can't emphasize that enough, right? Bitcoin, even if, it reaches, these crazy numbers where the volatility starts to decrease, right? It's in the millions of dollars per coin, which I think we'll definitely see. I think, the volatility is obviously going to decrease. Now, it's still better money, right, compared to fiat currencies, 100%. But obviously, in terms of the investing opportunity, the upside isn't as great as it once was. And I think this is where I think a lot of people, are not seeing, the potential upside. Now, Matt, do you, and this is getting into speculation territory, which we don't like to talk about on Simply Bitcoin, but, Michael Saylor did throw out that 100x number. Is that something that you can see as possible, especially with Bitcoin sitting at 63,000? I think 100x would put it at 6.3 million.
Let's be clear about what you mean. 100x in real purchasing power or in terms of dollars? Because in terms of dollars, it's an inevitability that it'll go 100x. There's no future where it doesn't go 100x, because the dollar will die eventually. The dollar cannot survive forever in its current form. They might come out with the $2, which is some CBDC thing, but in terms of today's dollars, that thing is dying. It must die. And so Bitcoin will go to infinity against that. But that doesn't mean it'll go 100x or to infinity in terms of purchasing power, like real world purchasing power. From a personal standpoint, based on gold's place in history, and Bitcoin fundamentally kind of replacing gold, in my opinion, then I do think it has 100x or more of real purchasing power potential increase. And I say potential because obviously this is technology. This is a project, and it is still an early stage project. From a socio-political historical standpoint, this is still a very early stage experiment, and it might not work out. But if it does work out and it does fulfill its promise, then sure, 100x in real purchasing power seems very reasonable to me.
I 100% agree with that. And that I can't emphasize that enough, right? If Bitcoin stays decentralized and secure, right? That's the big if. This is a project. A lot of people feel strongly about this, but I still think we have a tremendous amount of work to do on the educational level, as you can see by an entire class that supposedly was educated in higher education, literally booing the best money that has ever existed in the history of mankind.
I'd like to weigh in on that, actually, real quick. So the booing at Ohio State commencement. Two things to keep in mind here, okay? Because it's not just that simple, right? One is that this is a commencement address, okay? And if that guy had stood on stage and pitched Apple as a great investment or something like that, it would have been inappropriate, and obviously inappropriate, right? Like, commencement speeches are, they're whatever the speaker wants them to be, but traditionally and sort of what the crowd is expecting, you have to know your audience and know your, context. There tend to be sort of higher level, more, conceptual and philosophic and looking to the future and broad things. Like if someone got on stage and started pitching, we need to vote Republican in the next election, people would boo. And if he said we need to vote Democrat in the next election, people would boo. And in a way, Bitcoin kind of fits into that category, right? Like, I'm not sure that it was an appropriate setting for him to be pitching a crowd full of recently, college educated, children who just studied, Keynesian economics and socialism as the solution to everything, and their parents and their younger siblings, to then just put up a chart of like housing prices decreasing in terms of Bitcoin. It was a little inappropriate. And I think that is where some of the booing came from. It was like, who is this guy pitching us on an investment opportunity at our commencement address? So that's part of it. Okay. And the second part, which has nothing to do with the booing, I just wanted to let everyone know this, is that immediately following the booing, this guy said, in the early days, exchanges for Bitcoin were prone to hacks and fraud, but the issue has been resolved with the recent launch of the Bitcoin ETFs. This guy has no fucking idea what he's talking about. Okay, he's not a good representative of Bitcoin. So was it the booing and that are separate issues, but still, like, this guy's a little squirmy, right? And so I think the booing was in part the context, the timing, and the personality of the person delivering it.
That was a phenomenal analysis, and I completely agree with you. Guys, there's 2,231 of you guys watching live, not including Rumble. Let's see what Rumble's at. 48 of you guys watching live on Rumble. If you guys are enjoying this show, make sure to smash that like button. Also, shout out to the Rumble team for verifying us on Rumble. Really appreciate it over there. So yeah, guys, smash the like button. Really tells the YouTube algos and the Rumble algos and the Twitter algos to push the orange signal forward. So help us break 100 likes within the first 35 minutes of the show. Anyways, Opti, what's your take on this, brother? Yeah, I think Matt hit the nail on the head. That was a great analysis.
Yeah. I love Matt's take on this, and totally agree. And I didn't watch the whole speech, but I watched like the full 3 minutes that I saw on Twitter. And like kind of what Matt was saying, you know, the speech was a little bit cringe, I'm not going to lie, but, you know, let the cringe commence until financial literacy improves. So I think it is, you know, caveating what Matt said, I think this is a perfect like zeitgeist of the normal perception of Bitcoin. And obviously he probably could have took some better context cues and maybe wasn't the right place for the speech. But I think it does highlight what we say all the time here on the show. Like, this is what we're up against. I think most people have heard about Bitcoin. They've made up their mind about Bitcoin. A lot of people hate on Bitcoin and Bitcoiners in general. And this is how I know we're still early, is because most people still fundamentally don't understand what Bitcoin is, what Bitcoin's trying to solve. And, you know, Nico always goes to education. And part of that is, you know, maybe they didn't hear the right messaging around Bitcoin. But I think it also is kind of a culmination of what he opened the speech with. It's like, if you're open-minded, and that's the whole thing. Most people have made up their mind about Bitcoin, and they think they know what Bitcoin is about. They think it's about speculating and making money and all that good stuff. And I think this is just a culmination of everything that I've experienced when I try to talk to normal people about Bitcoin. So at this point, I am kind of like black-pilled. I only open up the Bitcoin pitch to people that I know are able to receive that pitch, whether they believe in freedom, whether they have pain points, whether they're having problems with their groceries and, you know, caring about real estate being too expensive. Like, I think it's kind of a good framing to be like, pick your battles, and you don't necessarily need to shill Bitcoin at every, you know, family dinner or every friend dinner that you have. I think there's a time and a place to really talk about Bitcoin. And it really goes to what I say all the time here on the show. It's like, you are a walking billboard for Bitcoin, and the best way to spread Bitcoin is by living that message. And, you know, we could probably go on about the kids booing about Bitcoin and dunk on them all we want, but I think it's just very important to remember that maybe it wasn't the time and a place to be shilling Bitcoin at the commencement speech. But hey, good on the kid for trying to spread that message. So shouts out to him for trying to orange pill 60,000 kids. And I think, you know, getting in the toxic Bitcoin route, like, this is why we have the meme that you get Bitcoin at the price you deserve. Like, I'm convinced people have heard about Bitcoin. They vaguely understand Bitcoin. They may have had a few touch points on Bitcoin, but they're just not ready to fully get the Bitcoin message. And it is what it is. This is how I know that it's still a great opportunity for us to continue to stack as many sats as possible and continue to plant those seeds of freedom and freedom technology and freedom money into the minds of people that are open to it. And so it just makes me know that we're still early to this. And I think those kids will look back on that speech or that moment in time eventually with shame when the bull run really does commence. Or
it already started. It already started.
Yeah, it already started. Exactly.
Matt hanged his painting.
Exactly. Bro. Or, you know, in the 10 years down the line when we 100X, they'll look back and be like, man, I was a dumb college kid and I was booing this guy who was trying to help me find financial freedom. I should have listened to him. But it is what it is. We're still early in this whole Bitcoin experiment, even though it's 15 years old. But a lot of people have made up their minds about Bitcoin. And so only very defining things will change their mind. Either they got to feel pain or the price has to go absolutely nuclear. And every single one of us has to not only build ourselves up, but build up businesses and be a shining example of what it means to be a Bitcoiner. And until then, we have the opportunity to stack sats. And as Matt is doing over there, when you build it, they will come. So in time, hey, this is just giving us good cover to build over here and continue to spread the signal. And eventually those kids will come around. But until then, hey, they will just have fun staying poor. It is what it is.
All right, everybody. Before we get on to the news, I do want to give a shout out to our sponsor. And of course, I'm talking about Anders Pleb Party. And it's going to be thrown at Bitcoin. It's going to be in Nashville. So if you're already going to the Bitcoin 2024 conference in Nashville, you definitely don't want to miss the 12-hour open bar from noon to midnight Pleb Party in Nashville, the day before the biggest conference in the United States, Thursday, July 25th. The last Pleb Party in Miami was sold out in 8 days. I can't emphasize enough the fact that if you're going to Nashville, you're like, okay, I'm not going to buy tickets to the Pleb Party. What's going to end up happening is that all your friends, including Larry Fink, Preston Pish, the entire Simply Bitcoin crew, James Lavish, Robert Breedlove, Mark Moss, Pubby, Tatum, all your friends are probably going to end up at the Pleb Party. And the last thing that you want to happen is you don't get your tickets. And then, it's sold out. It's like literally they can't let you inside because of the fire regulations. So you want to get your tickets quickly. It's going to be hosted at an amazing venue, a rustic automobile factory from 1910 with brick walls and tons of proof of work atmosphere. Over 1,000 Bitcoiners are expected to attend. So you can scan the QR code or check the link in the video description. Get your tickets to the Pleb Party at Bitcoin Nashville 2024. All right, everybody, let's hit the news.
The Daily News.
I want to give a shout out to our sponsor, Foundation Devices. It's self-custody done right. They built a premium grade hardware wallet called Passport right here in the US. It's fully open source and verifiable. It's the most intuitive Bitcoin wallet designed with a UX reminiscent of a simple feature phone. So you will know how to navigate it and use it the moment you pick it up. Get your Bitcoin off exchanges and into your own hands in just a few minutes. Experience the peace of mind that comes with taking ownership of your own keys. After a massive sellout during Bitcoin Miami 2023, the Passport is back in stock at foundationdevices.com. Bitcoin only, open source verifiable, completely air-gapped security model, gorgeous design craft, premium grade materials. If you're thinking about getting your Bitcoin off exchanges, this is the one for you. Check out the Passport link in the show notes below to learn more. I always make it incredibly easy for you guys. You can scan the QR code on your screen. It'll take you directly. That's the wrong one. Update. Okay. You can scan the QR code on your screen. It'll take you directly to the Passport by Foundation Devices website, where you guys can get yourself a Bitcoin hardware wallet. Completely open source, easy to use. If you pair it up with the Envoy app, like, it makes spending Bitcoin from cold storage incredibly simple. So check it out today. You can check out the QR code or check the link in the video description. Anyways, you guys are going to kill me, but I'm going to do it anyways. I love this book. I think it's not predicting exactly what's going to happen, but I like the philosophy and kind of like the theory behind how they made a lot of these predictions. And I think so far that theory has been proven right. So I always kind of give a little bit of sovereign individual thesis and quotes before we get on to some of the news segments, because if you see the news segments by themselves, standing by themselves, you don't connect the dots. You don't understand what is fully happening. I truly believe we are transitioning into this era of, I call it the great disintermediation of just the great disintermediation. I think two things are happening. First, the great disintermediation of information, massive peer-to-peer communications on a worldwide level has completely hindered the ability for mass narrative control. I think that's the first step. I think the interview I know the interview with Tucker and Mike Benz was so phenomenal. I can't emphasize enough how much you guys have to watch that interview, literally to the point where if you search for it on YouTube, it won't pop up. You have to search for it on Google, and it will take you to the YouTube video. But basically, he was making the case that governments were not prepared for social media. They were just not. It's caught them flat-footed completely. And then their attempt to censor information, and this has been leaked through the Twitter files. More information has been leaked that, the government has asked YouTube, Facebook, all these platforms to censor certain types of speech, to throttle certain types of speech. I think it's an indication of what I'm saying. And then what we're transitioning slowly into is the disintermediation of money, which I think will have even more consequence than the great disintermediation of information. Now, all of that being said, you have to prepare for what's to come. How do you prepare for what's to come? First, take Bitcoin into self-custody. Second, probably a good idea to run a Bitcoin node. Obviously, I recommend the one that I run, which is the Start9. There's a promo code down in the video description. Go to start9.com. And of course, sovereign computing goes into this. Nostr goes into this, right? Which is completely censorship resistant social media. And when you have these types of tools that governments cannot shut down, they cannot censor, it kind of becomes a forcing function in a way where they have to, because they can't shut it down, they have to kind of live with it. And if they're living with it, I don't think that, the approved narrative or fiat money, can withstand truth, can withstand competition. And I think that's what we're starting to see the first inklings of, and I'll give multiple examples of that. But before we do that, I do want to read some passages from one of my favorite books, not my favorite book, but one of my favorite books, The Sovereign Individual. So first, in the new millennium, cyber money controlled by private markets will supersede fiat money issued by governments. The authors have also predicted that with the rise of this new cyberspace and consequently cyber money, it will become harder for a nation state to collect taxes from its citizens. Now, when they say taxes, it's not only income tax. We'll get to that in a second, but it's also tax via inflation, which I think is a more insidious tax. I think it's a tax that people are just not aware of. When I see them clapping, or when they see, I walked around my neighborhood and I literally saw, little flags of things of saying like, look, I support this war in Ukraine, or I support this war in Israel, and I support whatever. And it's like, look, if you take a look at 2023, the U.S. government spent $1.7 trillion more than it collected in tax revenue. 1.7 trillion. Where is that money coming from? They're printing the difference. People don't understand that they are paying for it through currency debasement, right? It's this kind of this PSYOP thing. This is like, you have a whole stadium of kids literally, and Matt saying what I agree with his point. It's not appropriate setting, but they're literally like booing at this thing. Like they don't know. We still have so much work to do in regards to this topic. Anyways, I got a little bit sidetracked. Anyways, it goes on to say they compared the state to a farmer keeping cows in a field to be milked, but that soon the cows will have wings. They predict that for the government to collect taxes from its citizens in this type of society, it would have to violate human rights. Even traditionally civil countries will have to resort and turn nasty. And it goes on to say, lacking their accustomed scope to tax and inflate, governments, even in traditionally civil countries, will turn nasty. Businesses that offer the services that facilitate the realization of autonomy by individuals will be subject to infiltration, sabotage, and disruption. Arbitrary forfeiture of property, already commonplace in the United States where it occurs 5,000 times a week, will become even more pervasive. Governments will violate human rights, censor the free flow of information, sabotage useful technologies, and worse. And I can't help but to, in my mind, reference the Nayib Bukele article where it's called Don't Drink the Elite's Kool-Aid, where he says their most important weapon, their most powerful weapon is their control on the truth. Now, all of that being said, there's a lot of examples of this specific of these specific passages. So infiltration, sabotage, and disruption. So the U.S. government basically, by starting with Tornado Cash, setting the precedent that all of a sudden the U.S. Treasury has the power to sanction open source software. They set the precedent. Less than 9 months later, they started arresting Bitcoin privacy developers. And of course, I'm talking about the Samurai guys, once again, setting the precedent. And again, not through the legislative process, but the U.S. government has been able to successfully, destroy mixing without having to pass any type of legislation, basically through enforcement instead. Which, of course, this is lawfare. This is state-fare. This is what they're talking about, right? They're trying to impose the existing surveillance system on top of Bitcoin. And anyone who, basically goes outside of that system, they'll make an example of. And of course, I don't like to talk kindly about Roger Ver because of what happened with Bitcoin Cash. But at the end of the day, his arrest was basically sending a message to everyone, basically saying, look, it doesn't matter whether you gave up your U.S. citizenship. It doesn't matter if you broke these laws 5 years ago, breaking the laws in the sense of not paying taxes. The exit tax supposedly was what he was charged for. We will find you. It doesn't matter where you are. Uncle Sam will get you and we'll put you in a box and we'll make an example out of you. Mind you, right? Whether it's in the case of the samurai guys, like, who are the biggest money launderers? Banks. What do they get? What are the consequences for them breaking those types of laws? They get fines, right? Remember, no banker went to jail for 2008, even though I think that had a much worse effect on society than anything that the Samurai Wallet guys did, anything that the Tornado Cash guys did. And then this is what I want to talk about today, because this news just dropped. And I think, again, it's another reflection of how the state sees you, how the government sees you. This is in the case of Canada. So Canada is proposing a $25,000 penalty plus a 2 times exit tax to citizens who leave the country. The person who initially tweeted this says, I've been warning you, modern feudalism is coming to Western countries. I would even make the case that it's already here, right? And what's really interesting about the sovereign individual is that when they were writing that book, they initially passed the first exit tax in the US, and they were basically theorizing that this was going to be used against Americans down the road, right? And the whole idea, the whole premise of an exit tax, for anyone who's not aware, is this idea that if you leave the country, right, you say, I'm going to renounce my citizenship, you have to pay 50% of your net worth to the US government, right? So again, you took the risk, you made the money, you made the whatever, the US government feels entitled to 50% of that. Now that's the law, right? I can't argue that's the law. That's my opinion. I think it's an unjust law, but I think we're going to start to see more and more people flee unfavorable tax jurisdictions. Now, here's the official proposal. So it says Canada proposes $25,000 departure penalty and increased taxes to curb immigration crisis. In a bid to address a growing immigration crisis, the Canadian government under Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is reportedly discussing significant measures to deter citizens from leaving the country. According to insider sources, the proposed strategy includes a $25,000 departure penalty, along with a doubling of the exiting departure tax for those seeking to relocate abroad. This approach aims to stem the tide of Canadians moving overseas amidst ongoing national crises in housing, inflation, affordability, education, productivity, and climate. Okay, so you can make a very strong case that they are responsible for a lot of these so-called crises, right? It's definitely inflation. You can make an argument that they're responsible for the housing issues. You could definitely make the case that they're responsible for the educational aspect, for the affordability aspect. Now, instead of facing the consequences, what do? Exactly what the sovereign individual says, literally taking people hostage, trying to take an entire country hostage. It goes on to say the discussions are still confidential, with details yet to be publicly confirmed, as the government explores options to maintain its population and stabilize the country's situation. Now, they did propose, and this is public, a 67% capital gains tax. And in the US, if Biden gets elected, a 44% capital gains tax, right? So, it's just interesting how all of this is playing out. And again, I think it would, if Bitcoin didn't exist, man, it would be a pretty dark world, because it's just these governments, these states feel like they're entitled to you. I think that the book, when they said, they see basically a citizen like a cattle, and they have the ability to milk them, I think is a very, very accurate description in the way that they see you. And I think the internet has basically, started the freedom flame, and then Bitcoin came along and put a giant gallon drum of gasoline and just poured it on there, and it just ignited this fire. And they don't know how to react to it. They don't know how to, because their monopoly on violence doesn't have the return that it used to. And it's just very, very interesting, to say the least. Anyways, that's my take. Matt, what's your take on all this? Are you seeing what I'm seeing, or am I seeing things that are not there?
I mean, it's hard to argue with what is there and in front of our eyes. So this is definitely happening. It does accord with the thesis of the sovereign individual. It makes sense given the nature of government and fiat money and how these systems function, that they would want to restrict expatriation because it is removing productive energy and value from the economy. And for the US, you had brought it up, your numbers were a little off. So for the US, the tax is somewhere in the 23% range. That's 20% capital gains. Basically, the US treats it as, if you renounce your citizenship, it's as though you sold all your assets in that moment. And so you owe capital gains taxes on them. It's basically taxing unrealized capital gains at the moment of renunciation, plus an added like 3% fee or whatever. So it's not 50%. I'm not saying that 23% is good. It's criminal. That should be 0, of course. But secondly, it only affects certain individuals. So you have to meet a particular criteria to be taxed for renouncing your citizenship. You have to either have over 2 million in assets, or you have to have made the equivalent of like $400,000 or $500,000 per year for the previous 5 years to be. I just showed that connection was lost. Am I still here?
You're still here.
Cool. So again, not excusing it in any way, just adding a little bit of context to the whole situation. It's not that it universally applies to everyone. It only applies to high net worth and net earners, and it is 23%, not 50%. All that said, fuck them. That is a ridiculous human rights violation, in my opinion. We're free people, and we should be able to go wherever we want. If not, then we're not free. So I'm against it, but it's coming, and it's probably coming to most countries. And yeah, it won't work long term, but it will definitely affect people's lives before it doesn't work. It will work, right, for a while, and on many people. It will prevent people from moving, or it'll cost people in real meaningful amounts of money who do leave.
Yeah, I 100% agree with you. And I think, them making an example of Roger Ver is just them saying like, look, like, you can't escape Uncle Sam. Like, it doesn't matter where you are. It doesn't matter where you are around the world. If you don't pay this exit tax, if you don't pay your pound of flesh, we're going to put you in a box, essentially. So Opti, what's your take on this, brother? And then we'll get on to the culture.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think especially for us here, we cover the news every single day, but it's becoming clearer and clearer that the powers that be want to keep us in digital slavery. And hopefully more people are waking up to the illegitimacy of these institutions. And, the more they push, the more I think there will be an opposite reaction, and people start to wake up to how crazy things really are getting. But I think you did start with the conversation of Tucker Carlson and Mike Benz. And I think this is just another shining example of the power of peer-to-peer communications. And it's shown that the powers that be have lost control, hence why they're getting more and more desperate and trying to control not only communication and censorship on the internet, but also your capital. They're trying to instill as much capital controls as possible because, like Matt was saying, if they push too hard, people are just going to get up and leave. And so it's not surprising that they're going to make examples of people. It's not surprising that they're going to continue to make examples of people. And I'm not surprised that they're trying to control capital. We've seen this happen. We've seen this play out in history many, many times. And, the powers that be are going to continue to try to do this. So it's because everyone knows that there is only 2 votes that really matter, and it is with your feet and with your pocketbook. So once they try to stop you from moving and they try to control your capital, you know how desperate things are getting. And so it is a really defining moment, I think, in the history of humanity at large, that things are heating up because the powers that be are desperate. Hence why they are trying to censor information. Hence why they're trying to control capital, is because they have lost that control, or rather are losing that control. And people are waking up and people are having these conversations, and people are at the very least starting to push back against their narratives. And this is absolutely terrifying them. So I'm not surprised that Canada is doing this. Let's not forget that Canada is usually a test bed for extremely bad ideas. And so, like Matt was saying, don't be naive out there and thinking that, oh, this won't happen in the US or this won't happen in my country. Be prepared for this to come to a country near you, because we know that this has happened before. They'll do stuff in Canada and then they'll try to export that everywhere else. So if this is happening in Canada, then it's most likely going to happen in the US. We're seeing it happen in other Western countries already. So this is one of those moments where, if you have studied any amount of history, you know that this was going to happen when an empire starts to crumble, when people start to lose faith in these institutions, when the institutions start to lose their legitimacy. They always do the same thing. They try to crack down on people having these conversations, and they also try to crack down on your capital and basically force you into now it's digital slavery, but in the past it would just be just straight up slavery and make you one of their cattle or chattel, as the meme goes. And so I'm not surprised that this is happening. Canada I think has a long history of doing extremely bad things to their people, and the people just being too nice to say anything. So I'm not surprised that this is happening. Obviously, when you take this in the context of everything happening in the world, it's like Matt always says, this is exactly, par for the course of what empires do when they start to lose that power. They clamp down on their citizens. And so let's not be surprised when this happens everywhere else, because it's going to happen. They're going to try to clamp down on you guys moving freely, on your capital. They got to keep you in the ranch. They got to keep you in the cattle. They got to keep you in the plantation, for lack of better terms, because that's where they get their power from, is by people believing they still have legitimacy and controlling human conversations and human movement, which comes with the control of capital. So I'm not surprised, but man, Canada just absolutely wrecking their citizens. It must be bad being a Canadian right now.
All right, guys, before we get on to the culture, I do want to give a shout out to our sponsor. Of course, I'm talking about the Orange Pill app. Find local Bitcoiners, events, and merchants. The Orange Pill app is the Bitcoin social layer. Stack friends who stack sats. Download the app today. Join the 10,137 Bitcoiners. They're on the app. Has a really cool filtration system, so you'll only find fellow Bitcoiners on the application. And if you move to a new city, it will tell you the Bitcoiners that are around you. It's a great resource to connect with fellow Bitcoiners. It's probably a good idea to build up that Bitcoiner Rolodex, because I believe Bitcoiners are going to be some of the most powerful, influential people in the next 5 to 10 years. So download the Orange Pill app today. It's a great way to reach me and Opti. We try to answer each and every single one of you that are actively active on the app. So you can scan the QR code or check the link in the video description. All right, everybody, let's get to the culture. Talk about Start 9. Here we go.
The Daily Culture.
Everybody, before we get to the culture, I do want to give a shout out to our sponsor, KABOOMRACKS, the most trusted place to buy, sell, and host mining equipment. Check out the racks by scanning the QR code on your screen or checking the link in the video description. Also, check out their new offer, which is the instant hosting, which is currently live. All you got to do is scan the QR code. Like I said, check the link in the video description. They're offering instant hosting for the S19K Pro. There's a one-time payment of $2,466 plus $160 per month thereafter. Your hash rate goes online after your payment is confirmed. You own the miner. This is not a hash rate contract. The equipment is already online, has been running, so has a very low chance of DOA. The price includes 3-month security deposit, and first month, the hosting price is as low as 0.079 cents per kilowatt hour. So guys, if you want instant hosting, check out KABOOMRACKS. Check the link in the video description or scan the QR code. Opti, it is all yours.
Yeah, great. So, Matt, I do want to start. We're going to talk about Start9, the new product you just released, but I really enjoyed your Why Are We Bullish with sessions. I think it was last week. And in the face of everything we're seeing going on in the Bitcoin space, I think it's a good PSA, a good message to spread to our audience as well. So what's your take on everything going on, and why are you still bullish on Bitcoin?
Yeah, thanks. That was quite the rip. I was on one that night. It got really heated, like just passionate. So because this was in the midst of, the Samurai and Phoenix announcements. So first of all, that was a session called Why Are We Bullish? And so I was bringing up these horrible things as a means of being bullish for two reasons, really. One is because they are entirely predictable and expected, right? So when you're fighting a battle and your opponent does something that you expected them to do, regardless of how horrible it is, doesn't mean you should feel good about it, but you also shouldn't be devastated by it, right? You knew that they were going to do this. It doesn't mean that when it happens, you are happy about it, but you knew it was coming. And so it's part of the plan. You can deal with this. I personally, and maybe others didn't see this coming. I did. I couldn't imagine a future where Samurai was going to continue being able to do what they had been doing. It just doesn't make sense in my understanding of how governments function. Samurai's argument, rightfully, was that this was legal. What they were doing was within the law. And so therefore they can do it. And my response to that is yeah, but laws are just made by the same people that enforce them. They're just going to change the law. They're going to change the interpretation of the law. And yes, while it's easier said than done, because hopefully there's still some semblance of a judicial system and courts have authority that actually matters. But as, the centralization of power progresses, that type of stuff matters less and less, right? Eventually, the centralization force results in dictatorship. That is the end game of all sort of government evolution, is dictatorship, at which point courts don't matter at all, right? A person and that person's entourage can essentially just change laws on a whim and enforce those laws arbitrarily. And that is the inevitable kind of conclusion of every one of these stories throughout history. And oftentimes they don't make it that far. They fall apart before then, but that is the trajectory. And so I'm there's no future where they're just going to keep letting you do this, right? They'll just change the law. Even if that's not legal to do, who cares? They'll change that law. The law that made it illegal to change the law will be changed, right? So at some point, if you're doing something that is distasteful to the existing power elite, the incumbents, you're not going to keep getting away with it. At some point, you are either going to have to defend yourself, right? You're going to have to take a stand and fight back, or you're going to have to stop doing it. That could mean continuing to do it from a different location, which is a form of defense, right? That is a legitimate form of defense. So I would actually put that in the first category. So really, you have two choices. If you're doing something distasteful, whether it's legal or illegal, eventually you will have two choices. You will either stop doing it completely, or you will defend your right to do it effectively. And so that was sort of the PSA that I put out, was to anybody out there, myself included, who is doing something that will eventually, and is currently and will eventually be distasteful to incumbents, you better be prepared to do one of those things. Either stop doing it or fight back. And by fight back, I don't mean violence necessarily. I just mean effective defense, right? The ability to defend yourself through hiding, running, fighting, whatever it happens to be. And there's various categories here, right? Like what Samurai was doing was blatantly sort of antagonistic towards the incumbent powers, right? They were like openly advertising, like, come to our servers and here you can mix money in order to, evade surveillance, which is a wonderful thing. It's privacy, right? Financial privacy. We all deserve that. In my opinion, it's a human right. But it is blatantly against what the government wants. And they were thumbing their noses in it as well. And so it kind of added up to me that this happened, right? Like, you got to make an example of somebody. You got to, whether it was legal, what the government did to Samurai or not, is kind of, it's not irrelevant. It's just not the most important consideration. The most important consideration actually is a Pirates of the Caribbean meme that I posted from the Start9 account after this happened, which is the only rules that really matter are these: what a man can do and what a man can't do. That's ultimately what lies beneath the veil of all human society and legal structures, is force. It is, can they do this? If the answer is yes, you've lost. If the answer is no, you've won. It doesn't matter. You can lean on, nuance of law and loopholes and court battles all you want. But at the end of the day, if they can do it legally or illegally, doesn't matter. Doesn't matter if you're in the right. You'll just die a martyr at that point, but you're still going to die. And by die, I don't necessarily mean like life die. You're out of business. They're going to shut you down. So there's your summary of what I spoke about on Why Are We Bullish with Sessions. Was, these events were expected, and if you're not expecting them, you should expect them, which means you should prepare for them, which means get your defenses in order and get your escape route in order.
Love it, Matt. Great. I think it was a great bow tie to the conversation we had before. Before we talk about what you're building as a tool for some of that defense, and of course, we're over at Start9. So I don't know if you want to give again another little TLDR of what you're building with Start9, and then we can talk about your latest feature drop, which is absolutely sexy. So I guess, Matt, what is Start9? And then we'll talk about your latest product release.
Start9 is actually a pretty boring company in that we sell commodity style mini PCs with an operating system pre-installed, and then we warranty and provide great customer support for that product. That's Start9. The operating system that comes pre-installed on these devices that we sell is the interesting part of what we do. And I say we loosely because StartOS, the operating system, is an MIT-based open source operating system. Start9 has zero claim to it. We spend the majority of our time and money as individuals working on StartOS because it's the interesting thing that makes all these cool features and defenses possible for people. But it is not owned in any way by Start9. So it's effectively a donation. So StartOS comes pre-installed on these devices. And with StartOS, a normal person is now capable of running a personal server. And why would you want to run a personal server? Because it allows you to effectively exist on the internet and to use computers in such a way that no third parties, trusted or otherwise, that no third parties are part of your experience, that you are self-contained and independent in the digital realm. For example, if I want to text message my wife, I open up my phone, which is a Pixel 8 running Graphene. I highly recommend it. If I want to text message my wife, I pick up my phone, I send a text. Just like I would if I was using any other system. It's super straightforward and convenient, but that text message goes from my phone, where it is encrypted on the device, is then onion routed around the darknet, the Tor network, where it lands on a server in my home, which is sitting right next to me here. The message then resides on the server and is relayed to my wife's phone, again over the darknet, fully encrypted, lands at her phone where it is decrypted and she can read the message, and we text back and forth. Obviously, the experience of this is hi. It's just text messaging. But the messages are end-to-end encrypted, onion routed, and stored on a device that's in my living room that nobody on Earth, including my ISP, the government and anybody else has any access to. So it is provably, completely, trustlessly private messaging. Nobody even knows the conversation is taking place, let alone has the ability to snoop on it or store it or use it for advertising purposes or whatever. It's just me and my wife talking from any place on earth to any other place on earth, as though we were in a basement in a Faraday cage whispering in each other's ears. That's the degree of privacy that our computing paradigm affords. Now you can apply that to pretty much any computing experience. It's not just text messaging, right? You can do this with photo sharing, data, password management, video calls, right? I do conference calls, like video calls like this, sitting in front of a computer, talking with multiple people in a conference call, and all the electrical signals are going from everybody's device through a server that I alone control, fully encrypted. And so nobody on earth knows that conference call is taking place. Nobody can read that conference call, and it's free for life because there's no third-party service provider to charge me. It's all being run through my own infrastructure. And all of this has always been possible, but it's always been really, really difficult. You had to be a super geek to be able to set up the kind of computing infrastructure necessary to achieve what I just described. Not only did you have to be a super geek, but you had to have a lot of time on your hands. It was a very time-consuming, frustrating endeavor, even for the people who were technically competent enough to pull it off. So what StartOS does, the open source operating system, is it makes administering a server and setting up the kind of infrastructure necessary to use computers in the way that I described, inherently private and self-hosted, it makes it easy. I don't want to oversell it and say that any old grandma down the street can do this. Our level of technical competency that we cite as being necessary to use StartOS effectively is that you feel comfortable as an individual going into your settings menu on your MacBook or on your Android or iPhone device and making changes. Like, do you feel comfortable going into the settings and clicking buttons and making changes? And if you don't understand something, going to Google and being like, hey, how do I change the light mode on my MacBook from dark mode? Can I do that? If you feel competent enough to change settings and go to Google and look things up every once in a while, you can run a Start9 server that runs StartOS and use it to completely eliminate Google, Apple, Microsoft, Amazon, all these cloud service providers, all these SaaS companies. You can just eliminate them from your life, effectively opting out of this grid that has become quite diseased. The internet is a very, very dirty place. And you don't have to live there. You can get out. You can run your own computing infrastructure, run your own private clouds. And since we're on Simply Bitcoin, I would be horribly remiss if I didn't mention one of the primary use cases that people buy a server for or set up their own server is to run a Bitcoin node and a Lightning node so that they can exist on and participate in the Bitcoin and Lightning networks as a sovereign entity. You are not using some third-party wallet provider's node to send and receive transactions and validate transactions. You are not using some LSP or partial custodian or intermediary to send and receive transactions on the Lightning network. You exist on these networks as an independent. You don't need any permission, no terms and conditions, no possibility of censorship, zero custodianship. You and you alone control your finances and the ability to send them to anyone, anywhere in the world at any time that you want forever. You can only achieve that degree of power, independence, sovereignty if you're running your own server. There is no magic loophole, and everyone's been looking for the magic loophole for years and years and years. Everyone's been platform hopping. Oh, WhatsApp is compromised. Let's move to Signal. Signal's compromised. Let's move to Telegram. Stop platform hopping. Stop using platforms. Be your own platform. Take the infrastructure in-house. We've made it easy enough for you to achieve. It's getting easier by the day. Many people will attest to that. We have thousands and thousands of users all over the world running StartOS servers effectively and opting out of this grid. And so it can be done. It should be done. And if enough people do it, it's going to cause some serious consequences, right? Like, I'll hold off in case there's any response to what I just said, but I actually do have like a corollary that I might want to get into there if there's no immediate questions.
Yeah, I mean, I can attest to that. Just the ease of use, and I gotta say, like, you know, I didn't fully appreciate it until I got it running and I connected it with my Bitcoin node remotely, and then that kind of went. I started going down the rabbit hole of, you know, all the other applications that are on there. Right. Like the locally hosted mempool space, like that is awesome. Because if not, like, think about it. Every time you want to check, like you sent a transaction or whatever, like, yeah, you might be running your own Bitcoin node, but every time you go to, you know, blockstream.info or, you know, mempool.space or whatever, you're essentially doxing your IP address. Looking for that address, and it doesn't take a rocket scientist to be like, okay, I could probably have a pretty good idea that this address belongs to this IP address, because of why else would they be looking for it, right? So, you know, the fact that you can do that locally on your own machine is a big deal, in my opinion. The fact that you can connect to it, you know, anywhere around the world via Tor. I've done this in multiple countries. Is a big deal, in my opinion. And all the other, you know, capabilities and applications that are going to be added to it, you know, as time goes by, I'm incredibly bullish on sovereign computing. I see the vision, I see it, and I can't recommend it enough, guys. Like, try this. You're gonna want to run your own Bitcoin node anyways. So the fact that it has all this extra capability, I think is a big deal as well. So I see that Opti has.
Let's talk the server 1 2024 edition. I'll pull it up.
Yeah, so this is a new one that you guys just released, right, Matt?
Yep, that's the one.
So could you tell the audience a little bit about, you know, what is the server 1? I think I telegrammed you when you dropped. I'm like, dude, this is crazy. So could you talk a little bit about what the difference is? You guys have 2 right now. The server pure is the one I personally have been loving it. I think I got one of the first editions, and then the server 1, this is a new computing device that you guys released at Start 9. What is the difference between the server 1 and the server pure?
Yeah, great. So the server 1 we just launched, I should say the server 1 2024, right? So we have the server 1 and then it has a model year. So the 2023, we ran out of stock. We now have the 2024s in stock. The 2024s are significantly more powerful than the 2021s, or sorry, the 2023s. It has a Ryzen 7 5825U chip, which has an incredibly high benchmark of, like, you know, 16,000 if you go to the CPU Benchmarks website. So it's super powerful. We offer it in up to 32 gigs of RAM, 4 terabyte NVMe SSDs. So it is a extremely capable, powerful computer, capable of running every single service on the marketplace, with room to spare, with plenty of room to spare, in fact. So it is future-proofed and immediately, you know, super efficient and powerful and backed by us. So we warranty it. We support the hardware. We support the operating system. We support many, but not all, of the services that are capable of being installed onto the operating system as well. So we really are, Start 9 really is your sort of like helping hand technical support team and insurance that this is going to work for you and that you're going to get the help that you need. And that is really the reason to buy from us, is you're going to get this plug and play experience. You take it out of a nice box, you plug it in, it just works. You reach out to us if you have any issues. We're here to help. That's why people buy from us. You can go buy your own mini PC and probably save a few bucks. Flash StartOS to it for free, because StartOS is just an MIT licensed Linux distro. Flash it to the hardware and DIY. And we have a wonderful guide for setting that up. And we encourage people to do that, especially people outside of the US, because international shipping costs and customs fees can be hefty. So we have a lot of international people who just go get a computer locally and flash StartOS to it. And we super encourage this. And if you're happy and satisfied, please, you know, throw the project a donation. We are an open source project. We don't own this software at all. But the server one is an awesome device. It's super powerful. It'll get the job done. Now, as that relates to the server pure is a unique device that is much more difficult for someone to set up themselves, because the server pure, as the name implies, is pure through the entire software stack. It has no closed source software anywhere, all the way down through firmware. So the server pure implements core boot firmware, right? Core boot is, go look it up, is a fully open source firmware that has no closed source drivers at all. There's nothing on the device that requires even a single closed source blob of software to operate it. So you can sort of rest assured that the device is not doing anything that it shouldn't be. It's not sending some signal out to, the overlords when you're not looking. Furthermore, the server pure does something that's extremely rare in the world of computing, which is that it disables in firmware Intel's management engine. This is sort of the known backdoor that Intel has into pretty much every device on Earth that's using an Intel chip. And how is that backdoor being used? Is it being used? These are all very weird questions that you're not really allowed to ask if you go looking on Google. It's nobody really knows. And that's kind of the point, is nobody really knows what this thing is doing and why they are so insistent on keeping it on every chip. We have managed to build a device that runs core boot firmware and provably disables Intel's management engine in firmware. And the device is very powerful, like the server one, capable of running every service on the marketplace with room to spare. So that is why the higher price point of the server pure is, because it has this open software stack that is not easy to achieve. A lot of work went into making that possible. And so that is the reason for the higher price, is because we need to fund development of really awesome freedom technology like this. And some people care, other people don't. Some people are perfectly fine running the server one. It's super powerful, and it may or may not have some deep-rooted closed source blob of software that's a backdoor to Intel deep in the software stack. We at Start9 have no control over that. If you're using a computer, a laptop, a cell phone, a mini PC, it all has that same vulnerability. This is not like it's something unique to the server one. Every computer on Earth has closed source software somewhere in the firmware and at the driver level. Every single one of them that you buy off the shelf. It is very difficult to get a computer to not have those things. And that's what the server pure has, is it doesn't have any of that closed source stuff.
Yeah, and it must have been incredibly difficult to get the Intel management engine off of it, I'm assuming, right?
There is a group of people, wonderful people on the internet and in the open source software world, who work on stuff like this. And we are riding on their coattails, right? We have looked up what they have discovered, and we may need to tweak it for our own use cases, because every motherboard is different. Every version of Intel chip is different. Like the literal byte of code that enables or disables Intel's management engine is like something that has to be found by literally scanning bytecode and like trying different ones to see which one disables it. Like Intel doesn't tell you how to disable this shit. And so if somebody goes out and they figure it out and then they publish it and they're like, hey, everyone, I cracked the Intel i7 whatever model, and now anyone using that chip and board, because the board matters too, can now use their work. So we are not inventing this. We are just tweaking it to our own use case, but it's still just work. It's not easy to do.
Man, and that's, first of all, it's the power of the internet, right? The power of, people coming together, open source software. It's so incredibly important. I can't emphasize enough, guys. Like, this is one of the tools that you can add to your arsenal in becoming a true sovereign individual, right? So first step, taking Bitcoin itself, self-custody. I always say that. Second step, running your own Bitcoin node. I think the third step, that I'm coining this today, I don't think I've ever said this before, is, getting your own sovereign computer, right? I think that's the third step, so that you don't have to rely on someone else's. And I was scanning through the apps, and I believe, right, not only is there kind of like, password managers, there's cloud. It's not cloud storage. It's your own cloud. All right. Your own cloud storage solutions, but there's also a private messenger as well as one of the applications that is being offered. So there's so many different use cases that I'm incredibly excited about. And also, Matt, I know we've been talking about this for a couple months. You guys are going to be offering ClearNet also, as well as Tor.
Yeah. We have some wonderful things coming, and we've been saying that for a minute, right? Like this is hard. What we're doing is hard stuff. My history as a developer is in application development, like super high level stuff, like TypeScript and HTML, like building mobile apps and web apps and stuff like that. And even writing, server side software in Node or Ruby is actually where I cut my teeth. That's all like really easy shit. It's high level development, right? Most modern developers are basically like Frankensteining stuff. They're like taking this thing that exists over here and putting it, and then taking that thing and putting it, and then making it work for you. It's basically just reusing things that have already been invented and combining them in different ways, which I don't want to, undersell. It's still difficult, but it's not like gritty, low level computer science stuff, right? That is necessary for developing an operating system. StartOS is a low level Linux based operating system, and we are interfacing with hardware and firmware, and it's, we're doing it in a novel way. And so it just takes a while, right? Like we're paving new ground here. Nobody's ever really tried to do what we're trying to do. And so we've made mistakes, right? We have at this point rewritten, not updated or edited, but we have rewritten StartOS from scratch 3 times now. And the reason we did that was because, we wrote the first one and it worked, but then we realized that we had the wrong architecture. We had fundamentally the wrong abstractions, and that it wasn't going to scale in feature set in the way that we needed it to be ultimately grandma friendly, right? Our goal is to have this thing be usable by anyone. So we were like, all right, well, we got it wrong. Let's redo it. And so we rewrote it. And it was way better and way more featureful and extensible. And then we were like, crap, it still doesn't have the right abstractions. In large part because we were leaning too much on existing technologies to handle a lot of the low-level functionality, namely Docker and Avahi. Docker and Avahi. Avahi is an MDNS component library that allows you to do like, .local URLs and alias them, and to use SNI for hostname resolution and all the rest behind the scenes. And Docker is a container runtime solution that is widely deployed throughout individual and corporate world. And we thought that because these things were so established and widely used, that we could sort of grab them and use them. And as it turns out, they're both pieces of shit software. Docker is a pile of shit, and it needs to die. And so is Avahi. And what we did was we had to start looking for alternatives. And then you find out that, whoa, there's this alternative to Docker runtime called Podman. All right. So Podman's supposed to be, more reliable, and you can use it, in a more kind of customizable way. So let's switch to Podman for our container runtime. And turns out Podman's a pile of shit too. So now we've done this re-architecture, and so finally what we did was we just decided that those who came before us, we can learn from them, but they are not necessarily better or smarter than us. So we should probably just come up with something on our own, and that works better. And so that is what is coming. And that's what we've been working on, is this totally novel approach to container runtime technology, like basically running containers on a Linux operating system in a reliable, customizable, and efficient way. And if you are curious about what our strategy is, you can watch Aidan McClelland. He is my co-founder and CTO. He gave a talk on our strategy at FOSDEM over in Brussels a couple of months ago. And that is what's coming in 0.36. So StartOS 0.36, which is now in testing. It is running. It works. It's in testing. touts a new container runtime strategy based on Linux native containers, LXC containers, that are multi-image based. This is probably too much in the weeds for a lot of listeners here, but some people might appreciate it. So that's why I'm going this far, but I'll back off. Okay. So it is a LXC container with multi-image support, which effectively replaces Docker Compose, where you can take multiple pieces of software and orchestrate them together. Whereas Docker Compose takes multiple containers and orchestrates them, our approach is a single container orchestrating multiple images inside of it using Linux native containers, which are the most kind of customizable and gritty container management system that we have. So anyway, that's our approach. That's why it's taking so long. We get asked when 036 daily, which is why I'm spending a minute to explain why it's taking so long. Now the things that people care about, right? Really quickly. Why are we doing all of this? Like, what is the actual user experience benefit that comes about as a result of these changes? Number one, speed and reliability. Your StartOS is already more reliable, like it has better uptime guarantees and reliability than every other kind of plug and play, server type of solution. And we have tons of anecdotal evidence from users who have tried all the different platforms and been like, StartOS is the most stable. Things don't crash and, it just works. Well, it's about to get a whole lot better, like a huge step function increase better in 036 in terms of reliability. It's going to be rock solid and stable. It's going to be quick and efficient. That's number one. Number two is that we're ditching Avahi, all this MDNS aliasing bullshit. We're getting rid of all the .local URLs. Like, oh, I launched my mempool, UI at this .local, and I launched my Nextcloud at that .local. Those are going away, and they are being replaced with ports on the primary .local and IP address. What this enables is more traditional VPN and ClearNet hosting. So in 036, you will be able to seamlessly, easily VPN into your server and all of its services. So rather than using Tor to connect into your server, which is currently the only way to reach it while you're outside of your home, while you're away from the LAN, instead of using Tor, you'll also be able to use Tor. That's not going away. It's just we're adding a new option. You will be able to turn a VPN on your phone or laptop and connect to any service running on your server over using a VPN, which will give you ClearNet speeds and is completely private because you and you alone have the keys to access your local area network via VPN. So that's number one. Number two is ClearNet support. You will be able to, under the hood, it won't come over the hood until 040, but in 036, you will be able to, using SSH, set up ClearNet on your server. This means you will be able to selectively choose certain interfaces of certain services to host on ClearNet domains that you control. For example, let's say I install Ghost, which is a blogging platform similar to Medium, except self-hosted. So I install Ghost on my server, and I want my blog to be available not only on a Tor URL for censorship resistance, but I also want it to be available at blog.matthill.dev. Okay, which is a domain I control, right? I have matthill.dev. So if I want blog.matthill.dev to be available to serve my blog, I can do that very, very simply starting in 036 on StartOS. I will be able to go into the settings, make a few changes, and click save, and I'll be hosting a blog from my home. Now, there are some immediate kind of, security and implications of exposing even a single port on your home network, and all of that, all of those trade-offs and advanced measures to make sure that your network is secure will be published along with this feature so that people understand exactly what the trade-offs are, right? Hosting on ClearNet, not always a good idea for every service on your system because it opens you up to denial of service attacks. It is no longer private, right? Like any authority would know that that is your blog, right? Like if I host my blog on a domain that I control, I've doxed myself. So that's fine. A lot of people don't care. They actually want to be doxed. They want to be known. They're like, this is Matt's blog. It's not a secret. Other people who want to remain NIMs need to take more advanced measures to remain private and anonymous, or not private, but anonymous in their hosting strategies. And we will have guides for how you can do that. So
hell yeah,
it's all coming.
Dude, I'm so excited. I'm so hyped. With what Start9 is doing over there. Always been a supporter of Matt, and the incredible project that is Start9, the hardware and the software. And guys, go check it out. Start9.com. You can use promo code simplybitcoin and get I think 9% off. And I'm incredibly excited about not only the software updates, but the hardware updates to come. Every time I interact with Matt, I always think about the meme from Futurama, which is just, take my money. Anyways, Matt, it's been an honor to have you on Simply Bitcoin Live. We appreciate you. And thank you for coming on today.
Always an honor to be on, Nico.
Appreciate you, Matt.
Great show here.
Thanks, man. Guys, if you enjoyed the show, you know what to do. Smash the like button. Consider subscribing if you feel like we provided you value. Go check out our guest's project, Start9. Go follow him on Twitter at @MattHill_ I believe. And guys, if you enjoyed the show, you know what to do. Smash the like button. Consider subscribing. And of course, the number one thing you could do to help push the peaceful Bitcoin revolution is not only share Bitcoin media, right? Projects like Start9, they play a very important role in the separation of money and state, the disintermediation, the rise of sovereign individuals. So check it out. Anyways, love you all. We'll be back tomorrow for a brand new episode of Simply Bitcoin Live.
Episode was brought to you by bitcoinwell.com, on a mission to enable independence.